Will Smith has been hiding the fact of who he really is, and it was exposed that night that he's really an alt. Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on live TV in 2022, and every year since another headline has chipped away at his legacy. Some stars now question whether he deserves to be around others. But the slap wasn't the true collapse. It was just the beginning. What came next may be worse. The comeback that backfired. By 2024, there was a brief window where it looked like Will Smith might be pulling himself out of the wreckage. Bad Boys. Ride or Die performed well as a franchise entry, proving that audiences would still buy a ticket to see him in a familiar role. But a franchise sequel is not a career recovery. It is a reminder that you once had something bigger. In March 2025, Smith released Based on a True Story, his first album in 20 years. He launched a global tour to support it. The music itself received mixed attention, but it was the promotional material that detonated a new wave of backlash. In August 2025, Smith's team posted a 1-minute video on YouTube and Instagram showing dense, enthusiastic crowds chanting his name during European tour dates. The clip was meant to build momentum ahead of the UK leg. Instead, viewers immediately noticed something wrong. Faces in the crowd appeared melted, distorted with impossible limb proportions and extra fingers. Hallmarks frequently associated with AI-generated or heavily processed video. The crowd movements were eerily uniform. Hands waved in synchronized patterns that looked rehearsed by software, not performed by human beings. The clip went viral for all the wrong reasons. Forensic experts weighed in. Emmanuel Celiba of Get Real Security told The Times that while some scenes were identifiable as real concert footage, something has happened to the footage, and it appears distorted. The distortion, faces that look almost melted, is similar to distortion we see in generative AI videos. Other analysts likened it to cheating on crowds as a popularity proxy. Investigations by outlets like Waxside.org clarified that the crowds were authentic, real people at real European shows, but the footage had been AI-enhanced or upscaled, possibly by YouTube's own automatic processing tools. Other analysts, including Baru Leonsky of Rank Secure, warned that undisclosed manipulation risks eroding trust and likened it to cheating on crowd size as a popularity proxy. The distinction between fake crowds and real crowds with fake-looking enhancement did not matter to the internet. The damage was instantaneous and irreversible in the attention economy. Headlines in Rolling Stone, NPR, Euronews, CNET, and Mashable called it a PR nightmare. Reddit threads and exposts tore through the footage frame by frame, pausing on every warped face and deformed hand. The word that kept surfacing was desperate. A man who used to fill theaters with blockbusters was now, in their eyes, relying on algorithms to make it look like people showed up. Smith responded in early September with a self-aware follow-up video, a playful AI-generated clip that swapped audience heads for calf faces. Some praised the humor, others saw it as confirmation that he was leaning into artificiality rather than confronting the perception problem. The overall effect was that a man trying to rebuild his public identity through music had instead given the internet another reason to ridicule him. Then in November 2025, reports emerged that Smith attributed his album's poor chart performance and lingering backlash to racism rather than the slap or the quality of the music that provoked a fresh cycle of outrage. Critics called it deflection. Supporters called it a valid observation about an industry with a long history of moral policing aimed disproportionately at Black celebrities. Neither side budged. The comeback was supposed to remind people why they loved Will Smith. Instead, it reminded them why they had stopped trusting him. But to understand why the backlash never truly faded and why some in Hollywood began speaking in such extreme terms, you have to go back to the moment that shattered his image in front of the world. The slap that killed everything. On March 27, 2022, Will Smith walked onto the stage at the Academy Awards and slapped Chris Rock across the face. Rock had made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, referencing G.I. Jane. Jada has alopecia. Smith returned to his seat and shouted, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth." Minutes later, he accepted the Best Actor award for King Richard. The room gave him a standing ovation. Not everyone agreed with that response. Do you ever speak to Chris Rock after the slap 'cause he's your mate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rob Schneider, who sat on the Academy committee tasked with deciding Smith's punishment, did not hold back. No, but I was in a sticky situation because I was actually, an elected official of the union at the time. Will Smith is a that word set the tone for the rest of the interview. Schneider went further. Will Smith has been hiding the fact of who he really is, and it was exposed that night that he's really Anshul. The idea that the slap revealed something hidden is a theme that comes up again and again. Schneider said Smith's reputation as the nicest man in Hollywood was a lie. Well, Smith is like for me when I met him, right? I always say like the nicest, most wonderful. He's a liar. Complete utter fraud. And then the line that captures where much of Hollywood landed on the matter. Will is a dishabag. And that's something that you can't. The thing is that's how politically correct the Academy is, that they were so cowardly. Schneider argued the Academy failed to act in the moment because they were worried about being perceived as racist. Because if I would have done that, they would have been hauled out the prison because they was so worried about being, racist or whatever they like. He then made the point that violence is violence regardless of who commits it. The point is violence is what it is, and whether who with the color of your skin or your religion doesn't matter. If you commit a crime in front of other people, you get hauled out of there. When asked if Smith was standing up for his wife, Schneider shut it down. Doesn't matter. You can't hit another dude if he's standing up for your missus. It's a joke. And I also thought it was a very mild joke. Schneider, who is close to Chris Rock, described trying to reach him after the incident. Chris Rock just got slapped by Will Smith and I said, "Get out of here." It didn't happen. But it did happen. And Rock, according to Schneider, was processing something that went beyond a slap. It did happen. He didn't want to talk to anybody. I don't blame him. Schneider acknowledged that Rock needed time to work through it, but also it took him a while to get to where he could react to it, because it was a lot. You gotta process that stuff, right?
Yeah.
He then made clear that despite everything, Rock remained someone he deeply respected, and he's a very sensitive, great guy, and he's really literally a genius. That respect for Rock and the contempt for what Smith did to him ran through every word of Schneider's interview. It was not just about the slap as an event. It was about what it revealed about the man who threw it. The fallout was immediate and thorough. A YouGov poll found 61% of Americans called Smith's actions unacceptable, with older respondents condemning it even more sharply. 72% of those aged 65 and older said he was wrong. His favorable rating dropped from around 80% pre-2002 to 50% shortly after. A follow-up Yahoo News/YouGov poll showed unfavorable views of Smith rising to 47%, with 67% believing his actions were wrong. The Academy launched a formal review. Smith resigned from the organization and they banned him from attending Oscars events for 10 years. Netflix canceled Bright, too. Offer slowed. The man who once commanded $20 million per picture was suddenly the man people associated with a single violent outburst broadcast to hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide. The celebrity condemnations piled on. Judd Apatow described the slap as pure out-of-control rage and violence and noted Smith could have killed him, referring to the potential impact on Rock, not a suggestion of retaliation. Rob Reiner said Smith owes Chris Rock a huge apology and was lucky no assault charges were filed. Kathy Griffin warned it set a dangerous precedent for comedians everywhere. Sophia Bush kept it simple. Violence isn't okay. Assault is never the answer. Jim Carrey went on CBS and said he was sickened by the standing ovation Smith received. He called Hollywood spineless en masse and suggested Chris Rock could have sued for $200 million, arguing that the video would live permanently on the internet. But even Carrey drew a line. I wish him the best. I have nothing against Will Smith. He's done great things, but that was not a good moment. That was the ceiling of the criticism from Hollywood. The harshest voices stopped at calls for professional punishment, legal accountability, and personal apology. They called it assault. They called it embarrassing. They called it a selfish act that stole the night from other winners. But nobody advocated for retaliation. Nobody wished harm on Smith. The discourse stayed within the boundaries of condemnation without escalation. Smith himself reinforced that frame, posting an apology on Instagram the next day. Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive. My behavior at last night's Academy Awards was unacceptable and inexcusable. But the slap had created a crack in the foundation of his public identity, and everything that came after would widen it. The marriage that wouldn't stop talking before the slap. There was already a story building around Will Smith that had nothing to do with his movies. It was about his marriage. And more specifically, it was about what the public learned when the marriage was discussed on camera over and over for years. The Smiths had been married since 1997, and for the first 2 decades, the union was treated as proof that Hollywood love could last. They had 2 children, Jaden and Willow. They appeared at premieres together. They built a brand as a power couple. Then, the brand started to dissolve in real time on a Facebook Watch show in front of millions of people. In 2020, Jada Pinkett Smith sat at the red table on her show Red Table Talk and used the word entanglement to describe a relationship she had with singer August Alsina. While she and Will were separated, Will was sitting across from her. He appeared emotional. He did not leave. Jada described the relationship as something she needed to do during a period of deep personal exhaustion and distance from Will. She did not apologize for it. She framed it as growth. That moment became a meme. It became a punchline. And for a large segment of the internet, it became the moment Will Smith stopped being a man they respected. Why am I telling Will Smith to go get himself a copy of Stop Simp and the Man Crisis? Well, the reason why I'm telling Will Smith to go get himself a copy of Stop Simp and the Man Crisis is because after I watched his interview on Red Table Talk, online commentary reflected a consistent pattern. Will was called emasculated and spineless for sitting through the conversation and not reacting with anger. The framing revolved around traditional ideas of masculinity. If your wife is publicly admitting to a relationship with a younger man, you leave. You don't sit there and say you're on a journey. When a woman says that she has to go out here and have an quote-unquote entanglement during a separation, it's showing that that woman is no longer interested in you. Then in 2023, Jada published her memoir, Worthy. In it, she confirmed they had been living separately since 2016, but had no plans to divorce. She described their bond as enduring, but acknowledged codependency and dysfunction. She said she had taken on the adulterous wife narrative to protect Will during the separation. She told interviewers that Will had autonomy in the relationship and that the public was only seeing fragments of a much longer, much more complicated story. The memoir added fuel to a fire that was already burning through the comment sections of every platform on the internet. Newsweek and social media users labeled Jada toxic for what they characterized as gaslighting or controlling her husband. Reddit threads from 2022 through 2023 described Will as publicly humiliated and questioned why he didn't leave. Critics wanted Will to do one of several things: file for divorce, stop oversharing, assert more independence, or simply go private. The couple rejected all of those options. They said divorce just can't be an option because of the family and community they had built together. Jada said life is messy and that they couldn't live for other people. Anna Navarro on The View called Jada's revelations emasculating and embarrassing. Jada responded that critics hadn't done their homework and that headlines distorted reality, but the narrative had already calcified. From 2020 through 2026, the most common words associated with Will Smith in online discourse were not about his films. They were about Jada. They were about weakness. They were about a man who, in the eyes of millions of people, had given up control of his own story. And that perception made the slap look less like a husband defending his wife and more like a man who had finally snapped under pressure he refused to walk away from. Denzel Washington, who was in the room, offered a different view, one rooted in empathy rather than judgment. I want to say what we talked about, but be there, but for the grace of God, any of us. He framed the incident not as a character verdict, but as a moment anyone could fall into. You know, who are we to condemn? I don't know all the ins and outs of this situation, but I know the only solution was prayer. That was the minority view. Most of the public had already made up their mind, and the ones who hadn't were about to watch Will Smith try to rebuild his career with a music comeback that would somehow make things worse. But even when it seemed like the noise might die down, a lawsuit landed that introduced an entirely new category of accusation. The lawsuit nobody saw coming. On December 30th, 2025, Electric violinist Brian King Joseph filed a civil lawsuit in the Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles. He named Will Smith and his company Trey Ball Studios Management Incorporated as defendants. The allegations were harassment, predatory behavior, grooming, exploitation, wrongful termination, and retaliation. These were not vague accusations from an anonymous source. They came with specific dates, specific locations, and specific physical evidence described in the court filing, and they came from a man with a public profile of his own. Joseph is 33 years old. He is a Washington, D.C. native and was a top 3 finalist on America's Got Talent Season 13 in 2018. He had built a career performing at high-profile events and had posted an Instagram video in December 2024 showing himself on stage with Smith, captioning it as the first night of touring. According to court filings, he auditioned at Smith's home in November 2024 and was hired to perform at early tour dates in San Diego. He contributed tracks to the Based on a True Story album and joined the global tour that ran from roughly June through September 2025. The complaint alleges that Smith made comments about their special connection and spent increasing amounts of time alone with Joseph. Joseph's legal team characterized this as a pattern of deliberate grooming. The central incident in the lawsuit took place in March 2025 during the tour's Las Vegas stop. According to the filing, Joseph's bag, which contained his hotel room key, went missing for several hours and was later returned by tour management. When Joseph returned to his hotel room, he found it had been entered with no signs of forced entry. Inside was a handwritten note addressed to Brian reading, "I'll be back no later 5:30. Just us," with a drawn heart. Also present were wipes, a beer bottle, a red backpack, an earring, hospital discharge papers belonging to an unknown person, and a bottle of HIV medication with another individual's name. Joseph interpreted the scene as a threat. He reported it immediately to hotel security, a non-emergency police line, and Smith's management. Days later, according to the suit, a tour management team member shamed Joseph, accused him of lying, terminated his contract, and hired a replacement violinist. The complaint alleges this constituted retaliation for reporting workplace safety concerns. Joseph seeks unspecified damages for PTSD, emotional distress, lost wages, and reputational harm. On January 1, 2026, Smith's attorney, Alan B. Grodsky, responded, "Mr. Joseph's allegations concerning my client are false, baseless, and reckless. They are categorically denied, and we will use all legal means available to address these claims and to ensure that the truth is brought to light." As of February 2026, the case remains in its early civil stages with no trial date set. No criminal charges have been filed. Smith has not commented personally. The allegations are entirely unproven. But in the court of public opinion, the lawsuit landed like a boulder dropped onto a house that was already cracking. Media coverage in early January 2026 was extensive. People, Variety, The New York Times, The Guardian, The Los Angeles Times, and Rolling Stone all ran the story. Headlines consistently featured terms like predatory behavior, grooming, and retaliation. On X, posts from January and February 2026 linked the suit to every previous controversy: the slap, the marriage, the AI videos. Some users compared it to other celebrity scandals in the #MeToo era. Others noted Smith's silence as noteworthy. The cumulative effect was a reinforcement of a narrative that had been building for 4 years. Something is wrong with Will Smith, and it is getting worse. Legal experts who discussed the case and coverage noted that civil lawsuits are common in the entertainment industry and do not equate to guilt. They pointed out that the absence of criminal proceedings distinguishes this from higher-stakes cases. Supporters of Smith highlighted his long career without any prior similar public accusations. But in the economy of public attention, where perception travels faster than due process, the filing became another layer in an already thick story of decline. Insiders in 2026 described Smith as hard to work with due to control-freak tendencies and lingering anger issues, with offers reportedly continuing to slow the question of whether it's fair. Not everyone agrees with the narrative, and some of the people who disagree have pointed to something beyond the individual incidents. They have pointed to the pattern of how a certain kind of celebrity is treated when they fall. Guardian columnist Tiber Barrow argued in 2022 that the intensity of the backlash against Smith reflects respectability politics. The idea that Black celebrities who build safe, non-threatening images for mainstream acceptance face disproportionately harsh punishment when they deviate from that image. Smith spent 3 decades being the crossover star, the family-friendly rapper, the 4th of July box office king. When that image cracked, the backlash was not proportional to the act. It was proportional to the betrayal of expectations that were in Barrow's framing, rooted in a racial contract Smith never should have had to sign. Similar arguments surfaced around the marriage scrutiny. Defenders and outlets like Refinery29 highlighted misogyny, the specific intersection of misogyny and anti-Black racism directed at Jada. They noted that white celebrities who publish memoirs detailing marital dysfunction receive sympathy and book deals with no corresponding public shaming. Britney Spears wrote about her own marriage breakdowns and was met with compassion. Jada wrote about hers and was met with contempt. They argued the Smiths' transparency about their non-traditional marriage challenged romanticized ideas about perfect Black love, and the public punished them for it. The backlash in this framing was never proportional to the offense. It was proportional to the unspoken expectation that Black public figures must perform respectability or face consequences that white peers simply never encounter. On the other hand, one side effect of the slap that rarely gets discussed is that Google searches for Lipsia surged 600% in the days following the Oscars. Millions of people learned about a condition they had never heard of because of an act of violence committed in defense of a woman living with it. The irony of that Smith's worst public moment produced one of the most significant awareness campaigns for Lipsia in history is something almost no one talks about. Denzel Washington's words at the time of the slap carry additional weight in this context. "Wait a minute. I'm not done now. You know, the devil goes, oh no. Leave him alone. He's my favorite. Right. Don't bother him." Washington framed the night as a spiritual attack, not a character flaw. When the devil comes at you, maybe it's because you're trying to do something right. And for whatever reason, the devil got a hold of him, that circumstance that night. He then acknowledged the collective effort to support Smith in the moment. Fortunately, there were people there, not just me, but others in the gap. Tyler Perry came immediately right over there with me, and some prayers. That is one side of the equation. On the other side are the polls. By mid-2022, Smith's favorability had dropped from 66% to 39%. It recovered to 56% by early 2023, with Black Americans showing notably higher support at 73%. That racial gap in public opinion is itself a data point. It suggests that how people interpret the same set of facts depends at least in part on what they have experienced themselves. A YouGov survey from March 2023 also showed that 47% approved the Academy's ban, while 26% said both men were wrong, but that Smith's action was worse. The country was split. But the split was not random. It ran along lines of age, race, and cultural expectation. Tiffany Haddish offered one of the most direct defenses at the time. She described the moment as a Black man standing up for his wife and called it beautiful, even while acknowledging the method was wrong. Others, like Academy member Roger Ross Williams, took the opposite view, saying Smith reinforces stereotypes about Black people and that such behavior needed to be addressed elsewhere, not on a global stage. The tension between those two positions, empathy for a man under pressure versus accountability for an act of violence, has never been resolved. It simply sits there year after year, reactivated every time a new headline drops. Rob Schneider, meanwhile, rejected any defense rooted in context. The point is, violence is what it is. And whether with the color of your skin, or the year you know your religion, doesn't matter. If you commit a crime in front of other people, you get hauled out of there. And Chris Rock himself chose not to press charges or file a lawsuit, a decision that modeled de-escalation and influenced how the public framed its own response. As of early 2026, Will Smith continues working. He is producing Bear and has projects in pre-production. The Bad Boys franchise remains viable. He has not disappeared. But the question posed by the title of this video, why does Hollywood think Will Smith deserves to die, has an answer that is not about a wish for harm. No major celebrity, no poll, no mainstream outlet has called for anything beyond professional consequences. The death is a career death, an image death, a slow burial under layers of incident after incident after incident. The slap cracked the foundation. The marriage revelations eroded the walls. The AI controversy stripped the roof, and the lawsuit, proven or not, flooded what was left. Whether that destruction was proportional or whether it was amplified by forces beyond any single man's mistakes depends entirely on where you stand when you look at the ruins. What is not in dispute is the sequence. A slap, a marriage laid bare, a comeback laced with AI distortion, a lawsuit alleging predatory behavior. Each one alone might have been survivable. Together, they form the answer to the question in the title. Hollywood stars have not said Will Smith deserves to die. They have said, he assaulted someone. They have said he is a fraud. They have said he is hiding who he really is, and they have let the audience decide what that means for what comes next. As of February 2026, Will Smith is alive. His career, depending on who you ask, may not be. That wraps up this video. For more interesting videos like this, check out the cards on your